ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Thursday, April 27th, your drive. It begins right now on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. I have got a text line that we are going to use today. If you've never heard of this thing, it's amazing. What you do is you pull up your phone and you can send a text to the program, and I'm going to read them. 304-396-TALK. That's 304-396-8255. So you can text the program anytime. You can comment on what I'm talking about. You can also suggest things that we should talk about, or you maybe just want to get something off your chest. Whatever it is, the text line is open this hour. And if you like to keep it on social media, you can find me on Twitter at Paul Swann. So you now know a couple of ways you can be a part of the program. We have a list of things to get into today. We've got to start with what happened earlier here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930, as it was the Pirates defeating the Dodgers 6-2, winning the series. So now the Pirates are 18-8. Milwaukee right behind them in the Central at 16-9. The Cubbies are 14-10, and then you get into the losers section. The Cincinnati Reds improving, but still 10-15, and then St. Louis 9-16. St. Louis is already 8.5 back. The Reds are 7.5 back. Milwaukee's only a game and a half back, and then the Cubs are 3 back. It's going to be a long season, but right now the Pirates are rolling, and we'll have the game for you tomorrow right here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930, as the Pirates will take on the Nationals. 7:05 will be first pitch, so looking forward to it. And again, your home of Pirates baseball all season long is ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Speaking of the Reds, they do have the day off today, but as I alluded to, they're getting better. They swept the series against the Rangers, did that 5-3, and Cleveland also was in action yesterday, defeated Colorado 4-1. The Guardians have today off. We'll get you updated on what's happening with the playoffs a little bit later on, NBA playoffs, NHL as well. Let's get you started with what's happening with the Thundering Herd. There's so many things we can talk about. I don't know where I want to begin. I think I need to start with what's happening at the stadium. Let's go there first. Now, I've seen a couple of the photos that you've posted on social media. I do see them. And Marshall put out a video today alluding to what's going on. We've talked about it before, including with the athletic director, Christian Spears. He doesn't call it this. I call it this. The erector set is coming down, my friends. That is one of the things that I have wanted to see happen at Jones C. Edwards Stadium since those terrible, awful seats went in. I know some, including people in my profession, don't like seating capacities going down. Using the Cam Henderson Center as an example, with those terrible Herd Heaven seats being tarped off. They were terrible. You know it. The erector set was worse. One of the most terrible executions of stadium expansion. There wasn't any bathroom facilities over there. The seats didn't match the stadium at all. It's just like, hey, throw some seats up. Here we go. And of course, this stadium has had issues from the beginning. Remember, it was promised as a 30,000 seat stadium. You need 30,000 seats to get into higher level football. Need to be 30,000 seats, D1. Okay, let's add some chair backs to only a certain section of the stadium and forget to recalculate the seating capacity. And so those end zone seats had to be put in a little bit later on to bring the stadium up to the proper capacity. You want to be a Division I school, there are certain rules that you need to adhere to. And then right when things were going well, I think, for the Thundering Herd, okay, let's stick those awful expansion seats on. That way, Marshall can attract bigger names to come into the stadium. Bigger names, bigger capacity for seating. trying maybe to get into a different conference when Marshall was successful had to have this many seats. Those seats were terrible in execution. Absolutely did not fit the stadium. It's been an eyesore. I think it's been something that has been detrimental to the atmosphere of Jones C. Edwards Stadium. Let's be honest. Marshall's got a good core of fans that will show up, but Marshall's not pushing 35, 40,000 fans on an average at Jones C. Edwards Stadium. It would be a great problem to have, and I hope that Marshall can one day see such a high demand that maybe you've got to come up with some different seating options for the football stadium, that you've got to come up with some different opportunities, maybe some pricier seating, maybe additions to the skybox. Maybe, of course, those end zone suites that you see some of the concept art, those become a reality. You have options. You can do things. But I've always wanted those seats down. I like the atmosphere that Marshall has started to generate at football again, because now the fans that are showing up, not so spread out. Now, my argument's completely moot. I have no room to talk if people were showing up 35, 40,000 consistently, getting close to filling the stadium, bringing it to capacity. So I think what has happened here is the stadium is being right-sized again. You're correcting maybe an error. Hey, let's be honest. Marshall's got a great group of fans, a great core. I'm going to go back to Mike Hamrick. Mike Hamrick said Marshall's got the best fans in the world, just need more of them. And so hopefully the end zone project will create a different and better atmosphere. Maybe there's going to be some opportunities there with some suites, the scoreboard that the athletic director has talked about. When I pressed him, how big can we get it? He initially said he wanted the biggest one in the country. Not necessarily going to get the biggest one in the country, but it's going to be big, right? That was sort of the goal. So I'm happy to see that project moving forward, and I hope with that seating area taken down, and maybe you can do some expansion. I would love to see some expansion in the concourse areas. That's a thing that I really want to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years, short term and long term. I want to see not necessarily seating capacity expanded, but I want to see, let's call them the creature comforts maybe. Let's call them things that improve the experience. And we can go on and on and on, and I don't want to just rail on what's wrong with Jones C. Edwards Stadium, because when it opened, it was fantastic. All a lot of Marshall fans knew was Fairfield Stadium. So when that stadium opened up, it was fantastic. It was a great, great stadium. And so it's fallen behind the times a little bit. Needs some updates. The concourse area especially, the points of sale especially, the bathrooms especially. There are a whole list of things we can probably talk about. But the end zone project, I think that's the best thing that I've seen going here in recent memory. You always want to try to make your facilities as fresh as you possibly can. You're not going to get a new football stadium anytime soon, so you might as well take care of the one you have and try to enhance the experience from top to bottom. 30,000 seats plus, I'm good with that. You can add more elsewhere, I'm good with that. Those terrible end zone seats needed to go, and I'm glad they're going. 304-396-TALK is our text line, 304-396-8255. It's time for you to react. Are you going to miss those seats? I want to know. Are you going to miss those end zone seats? Are you still mad that those were tarped off last season? Are you going to miss those? Are you happy that they're going down and you're excited for what's going to eventually go up in that area? What would you like to see? It's not a done deal until it's a done deal. So what would you like to see over there? Would you like to see the seating deck, the suites? Would you like to see a ginormous scoreboard? What would you like to see over there? 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. 8255. We've got more coming up on this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Our text line is 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Welcome back. My name is Paul Swann. You're listening to The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Been keeping an eye on what's been happening with JMU. Let's stay in the Sun Belt for a minute. Let's keep with football. If you've been following along, you know that JMU is right now in the midst of its transition from FCS to FBS. And so JMU requested a waiver to shorten its FBS transition requirement from 2 years to 1. However, the request was denied. So now JMU football will not be eligible for a bowl game in 2023 and is unlikely to be eligible for the Sun Belt Championship. So transitioning up has gotten a lot harder. You remember when Marshall made the transition? Marshall jumped from winning the 1AA championship in 1996 to jumping into the Mid-American Conference in 1997. Marshall won 10 games, lost 3. Lost to WVU that year, lost to Miami, and lost to Ole Miss in the bowl game. But Marshall won the MAC championship. So Marshall definitely set a path forward for a lot of these schools to make that jump before these requirements got a lot tougher. If Marshall was 1AA or FCS and trying to make the move to FBS today, there would be that transition period. Do you think it's fair? I don't think it's fair. I don't think there should be a transition period. It's not hurting anyone to have a team ready to go. How's it hurting? Now, if you want to make it a one-year transition, okay, that's fine. Because remember, the rules have changed now. Before, here's where Marshall was able to really put together some successful teams. In years past, if you wanted to drop down from then 1A to 1AA, you could drop down and start immediately. You could play. You didn't have a restriction. So here's what Marshall would do. Marshall would get players that were good but not getting maybe enough playing time, getting enough attention. It's sort of like the precursor to the transfer portal. And Marshall definitely took advantage of that because you could bring in players from higher level schools. Those players would drop down and immediately could play. Eric Kresser, come to mind. Eric Kresser was able to go from Florida, drop down to 1AA, play with Marshall, and then, well, you know what happened there. 1AA national championship. 1AA national championship. And then Marshall moved up, but Kresser got to play, got to show himself, got an entire season in, had a pretty good wide receiver to throw to. His name was Randy Moss. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he was pretty good. And so the Thundering Herd able to take advantage of that. This is what the transfer portal looked like. Drop down, you're ready to go. You could bring in some really good talent. And so I can understand if you want to maybe limit. You can't just jump up, be ready to go. You got to wait a year. All right, I get that. But 2 years, I don't think that's really fair, especially now with the transfer portal, because players can transfer in, transfer out. It's not as if JMU was loading up and then jumping up. And with the transfer portal, Marshall could get lucky and load up tomorrow. There is nothing that ultimately could stand in the way of Marshall loading up from the transfer portal and putting together a tremendous team that could maybe go beat Alabama. I know it's going to be a heck of a transfer portal class. You got to put it all together still. But if Marshall knew how to work the transfer portal to perfection, bring in all these super high-level players that are out there, make it all work, Marshall can make a run for the national championship. Marshall could beat Power 5 schools on a whim. It's possible. The transfer portal giveth, and it also taketh away. So that's what I think is really at odds here. The NCAA telling JMU that you got to wait another year. You can't transition up. But I don't think there's anything that really makes sense in that ruling because the transfer portal sort of changed the landscape here. It was different. Marshall, back in the 1AA days, there was a lot of talent in the 90s. A lot of talent in the 90s. Players could come down, play right away for the Thundering Herd. Maybe not getting a fair shake at where you're at. You transfer, you got to wait a year. You know what? I'm going to go to Marshall. I can play right away. And they're pretty good. They're really good. People are talking about them. I'll get seen. The 90s were fun, were they not? From our text line, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Texter says, I love the idea of a new screen and hopefully a new sound system, but I think we should make an area to honor our Football Hall of Fame members like a Walk of Fame and the 75. I'd like to see a little bit more of a fleshing out of that, what that would look like in your mind. Because you have the 75 on the field now. The 75 is there for all to see. You walk in the Jones C. Edwards Stadium and look out on the field, there's the 75. Okay. And you have the Hall of Fame. You can walk across the street from the stadium, and you've got Marshall's Hall of Fame. Is it nice? Yes. Is it too small? Yes. Does it need expanded? Yes. Could you create a Ring of Honor at Marshall University? Possibly. You could do that. Or you could incorporate that in with whatever you come up with. If you're putting a new scoreboard up, you could have an area that honors the football greats. You could expand the shoey. You could tear the shoey completely down and expand that area, come up with a new facility building. Absolutely. You could bulldoze the shoey tomorrow and come up with a new, bigger, and better shoey building. And then you could incorporate things like a Walk of Fame maybe in the shoey, a Hall of Fame. You could do something like that. What you might want to do as well is, and this is going to take time, energy, and money. Time, energy, and money. You could start kicking out the concourse more so, expanding the concourse, pushing it back, building around on the other side. Instead of having those tarps in that gated area, kick all that back. Start building around and have the concourse area, maybe once you get in, it's more enclosed and you can have more things. Expand that area a little bit, kick the club areas back a little bit more maybe. Have the press box go around further, or the sky box, whatever you want to call it. Kick that out. You can have more things. You can have expanded club area. You could have expanded concessions. You could have an expanded team shop. You could have possibly maybe taking a page out of the ballpark in Cincinnati. You could have maybe a museum, maybe a football building that is dedicated to the football history of Marshall University. I mean, there are so many things that you could possibly do here. And again, that takes more than me saying, hey, you should do that. That's going to take time, energy, and mostly money to do all that. But that could be something that you could see in a grand scheme of things here. I think the first things first, get that seating area down. Put something there of real value, such as a ginormous screen, a new seating area, sort of maybe like Southern Miss, how their end zone is. Have a monster scoreboard here. Have something really fantastic looking. I'm sorry, I might not make friends with this next statement, and I'm okay with that, but it's time for that scoreboard to go. I mean, it was a nice little concept at the time. Hey, you got the scoreboard inside the Block M. Yeah, I think I want something a lot bigger, a lot grander, and I want something that blends into the stadium. I really want to see the interior of the stadium experience improve. I want Jones C. Edwards Stadium to be a great experience when you go into the stadium. From the time you get to the west lot and the time you get into the stadium, it's an experience. You have options for concessions, better options. You have better facilities. Expand the club area. Have expanded luxury boxes. Have a better experience for the fan visiting for the first time. Have some interactive games. Have a museum. Have a Hall of Fame type facility where people can learn about Marshall football all in the stadium. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Texter asks, what is Conference USA going to look like? How are they going to be able to cover all of their bowls since they have so few 1A teams for the next 2 years? I think they're just going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to hope that all of their teams are going to be able to be eligible. I think there are too many bowls to begin with. To be honest, too many bowls, but there are partnerships, there are arrangements, there are primary bowls, there are secondary bowls, there are options for the league. Honestly, I think there are too many bowls, and so if Conference USA can't honor the obligations that whatever the new bowl arrangement is going to look like, that's an open bowl for a team out of the Sun Belt or out of the Mid-American Conference. I'm curious, though, to see how Conference USA tries to navigate this. Now, Conference USA is looking pretty good in basketball. I'm sorry, I mean the American was looking really good in Conference USA basketball. So I'm curious, can Conference USA maintain relevancy over the next 2, 5, 10 years? With the Mid-American Conference being solid in football, with the American being solid in football, with the Sun Belt being solid in football, the American really good in basketball, with the Mid-American Conference not terrible in basketball, with the Sun Belt trying to improve basketball. I'm curious to see how Conference USA remains relevant over the next 5 to 10 years. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. We'll get more of your text in on this edition of The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
We carry on with this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. My name is Paul Swann. You can be a part of the program by texting 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. I had to go back and look and see Conference USA bowl package. What's it look like this year? I don't think Conference USA is going to have to worry too much about the bowl situation if there are overflow teams and Conference USA has an opportunity to fill some spots. There will be that opportunity, but obviously the top champion of the group of fives will be in the mix for a Access Bowl. Okay? Let's say that right now. Here's the lineup for this season. The Bahamas Bowl. That's against a MAC opponent. The Armed Forces Bowl. That's versus an AAC opponent. The New Mexico Bowl. That's versus the Mountain West. And the New Orleans Bowl will be against the Sun Belt. Now, there will be some other bowls that will be determined between the group of five conferences, like the Frisco Bowl, the First Responders Bowl, the Boca Raton Bowl, the Cure Bowl. Those games will be versus a group of five opponent. And then Conference USA has some tie-ins. There's that affiliation. So if a conference can't fill all its slots, well, Conference USA, if enough eligible teams are in the league, could fill right now the Camellia Bowl. That's against either a MAC or a Sun Belt team. The Fenway Bowl, that would be versus an ACC or an American team. The Lending Tree Bowl right now, that will be against a MAC or a Sun Belt team. The Myrtle Beach Bowl would feature a contest against either American, MAC, or Sun Belt. The Ticket Smarter Bowl, the Birmingham Bowl, that's going to be against American or SEC. And then the Gasparilla Bowl will be either against a actually, it's going to be between Conference USA, if filling in the affiliation, versus ACC, American, or SEC. So the Gasparilla Bowl looking pretty good, actually. I don't think that that's going to be an issue here. That's not going to be something we're going to see a lot of. Conference USA filling bowl spots, because you have 9 teams in Conference USA with no divisions. FIU, Jacksonville State, Liberty, Louisiana Tech, Middle Tennessee, New Mexico State, Sam Houston, UTEP, and Western Kentucky comprise Conference USA for the 2023 football season. Isn't that a shell of what it once was? Absolutely a shell of what it once was. I'm so grateful that Marshall got out of this thing, to be honest with you. I will say this. I really enjoyed Marshall and Western Kentucky. When it comes right down to it, Western Kentucky and Marshall, I enjoyed that. I don't know if people enjoyed that travel, but just the rivalry aspect of that series, that was good. And I liked Middle Tennessee. I liked Marshall, Middle Tennessee. I don't know if that was one of your more favorite matchups as far as maybe the rivalry aspect of it, but of the teams that are left in Conference USA, I could take or leave FIU. I have nothing for Jacksonville State right now. Liberty, I can take or leave. Louisiana Tech, I could take or leave. New Mexico State, definitely take or leave. UTEP was all right. Sam Houston, yeah, again, I could take it or leave it. But Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee were those schools that I hated seeing off the schedule. Texter writes in 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Who do you believe is Marshall's biggest Sun Belt Conference rival? That's a good one right now. Okay. Let's think about this for a second, shall we? Let's entertain this. Now, before this league started with the new teams, before this thing started with the new teams, I thought that Marshall and App State would be a big thing. Absolutely. I thought it would be Marshall and App State. Now, I think Coastal's picking up. I have a thing for Georgia Southern because, again, I go back to the Southern Conference days. But I'm really starting to like Marshall and JMU. Are we talking football? Because other sports are going to have a different take on this. But if we're talking football, I'm going to have to say my top four right now, it's JMU, Appalachian State. I'm going to go Coastal and Georgia Southern. That's what I'm going to say right now. JMU, App State, top two. Coastal, Georgia Southern. That could probably flip. I'll throw that out to everyone else. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Now, the thing is, though, Marshall and App State, that goes back a ways. So there are some fans that are like me that remember when Marshall used to face off against App State. And so we're going to point to that as being, hey, that's Marshall's biggest rival in the Sun Belt. And I also remember when Georgia Southern was this upstart coming in. And now this was a successful program coming into the Southern Conference. It wasn't as if they just started football and here they were. You know, they were an upstart in the league. They had some swag to them. They beat Marshall in that one game. Marshall was successful against them ever since. But I think of the two Southern Conference schools, App State ranks higher for me. But I'm really liking this James Madison University vibe between the two. The thing I hear from a lot of Herd fans on social media when you're messaging me and you're dropping me a note is that you hate the JMU fans, that they're arrogant. And I'm all for it. If that means that Marshall and JMU becomes a really hot, talked about rivalry, I'm here for it. I like it. I'm okay with a little back and forth between fan bases. Now, with that said, let's keep it respectful. Let's not get stupid here. Honestly, it's okay to get after fans. It's after all it's a back and forth. It's fun. But as long as it's not stupid, I'm good with it. But I've had some good interactions with JMU folks. But at the same time, you want to get after them. So I'm going to go with JMU, then App. Long story short. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Who do you believe is Marshall's biggest Sun Belt Conference rival? We might throw that up on the poll on the Twitter page. But I'll take your text. More of those at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255 when we continue with this edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Welcome back. It's the Thursday, April 27th edition, The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. We've had a good time today from our text line. I appreciate that. You can add to our conversation, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. A couple of things we need to make note of. Now, coming up next week on the show, we'll expand on this. But first of all, and Tuesday is going to be a very busy day unless I get a reschedule or a readjustment of the schedule. But first of all, tentatively speaking here, I've got Kim Stevens coming back on Tuesday. This is tentative. So I'm promoting it now, promising you Tuesday. She'll be back on the show. We'll talk about her latest additions to the team and how the recruiting process has gone so far. So she's coming on the program. And then I'm double booked, but that's okay because I enjoy both of these coaches. Kim Stevens getting to know, and Ari Agnes is going to be on the show Tuesday. The reason why I invited Ari on the show is that today she was granted a contract extension through 2027. So congratulations to her. The reason why I wanted to bring her on the show, just to talk to her briefly about that, and of course, just to congratulate her as well. I think that every coach at Marshall has something to offer, not only for the growth of the program as an athletic department, but in the community. And day one, Ari Agnes has been Marshall-focused, community-oriented. It was hilarious. I had maybe met Coach one or two times previously, and when we were doing Safe Trick or Treat, we were at the arena, downtown Huntington. Her squad came in full costume. Not showing up and just giving candy. Her squad came in full costume. I'm talking her coaching staff, her players, full costume, ready to roll. At that point, I knew I liked Ari Agnes. So she's coming on the show Tuesday. We'll talk about that. But, hey, congratulations to her, 2027, of course. We'll try to juggle both of those coaches. Hey, maybe I can get them both coming in together. That would be hilarious. But that's what we're coming up on Tuesday for the show. A couple other items to talk about briefly. And again, nothing really official until we can talk about it is what's happening in the transfer portal. First of all, Marshall always looking to get better in the transfer portal, right? Well, earlier today, former Rice quarterback TJ McMahon in the transfer portal, indicating on social media that an offer has been received from Marshall University. So there you go. Former Rice quarterback in the portal, and a Marshall offer is on the table. Quarterback competition, anyone? I still firmly believe, until otherwise proven wrong, it's Cam Fancher, Cole Pennington, everybody else. In that order. That's what I truly believe until I'm proven wrong or I'm told differently. That's what it is. Now you throw this into the mix. I mean, maybe you bring someone in to spice it up a little bit as a grad transfer. Come in, finish up your career, bring some experience in, right? We've seen that before. Bring some experience in. Hey, let's remember, Fancher, he's got a lot of years left, and he's got a lot of development still ahead of him, which is a positive. For what he did at such a early stage of his career, I think he did a great job. So that's what's on the table today. And anything else that's happening, we'll keep an eye on. Weather-wise, softball, we'll keep an eye on that. Marshall tennis, I got to mention that real quick. And we'll try to get John Mercer on sometime next week. Right now, of course, coach is trying to win a conference tournament. But Marshall, as the 6th seed, swept the 11th-seeded ULM Warhawks to open up conference play. And so the next match, and again, weather being the issue, the next match will be against 3rd-seeded Coastal Carolina. And that's been moved, if I understand correctly, due to weather situations. We'll keep an eye on all of that. And don't forget, we got softball coming up as well. Golf yesterday finished 13th at the Sun Belt Championship. So that's where we stand with everything happening with Marshall. I think I've got us all caught up. That's going to do it for this edition of Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Thanks for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Don't forget, podcast available, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And Friday, everything's been pushed to Friday on the tennis tournament. Just wanted to double check that and confirm it. So there you have it. Tennis in action on Friday for the Thundering Herd. We'll talk to John Mercer hopefully next week. Have a great night, everyone.
WRVC Huntington, W227BS Huntington. This is your radio home for Pittsburgh Pirates baseball, ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.